Seems fair to me.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the new Open. Welcome to another edition of Donnybrook. Great to have you with us. Lots to talk about this week. Let's meet our panelists, starting with Wendy Wiese from the Big 550 KTRS, Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Joe Holleman, sitting in the seat once occupied by Ray Hartman. Joe and Sarah Fenske will be rotating in that position. We're so happy about that. Joe, of course, is with STLtoday.com. And from your St. Louis American, Alvin Reid. Before we commence, a little shout out to Heather Haymart. Heather provided that beautiful artwork now adorning the mantle behind me here on the plush but not overly ostentatious studio. So thank you very much, Heather. And folks, if you want more information about Heather, go to heatherhaymart.com. Bill McClellan, yet another change in the St. Louis scene. This time, Fred Pestello, the longtime, 10-year president of St. Louis University, has announced that he's going to step down in June of 2025. He had some tough, big shoes to follow, didn't he? Tell us what you think.
Well, he had some huge shoes to follow. I mean, Larry Biondi, Father Biondi, but call me Larry, was a larger-than-life figure, and for newspaper people, it was wonderful. And I thought that Dr. Pestello did a fine job, but the basketball team just couldn't get hooked during his tenure, and so they need somebody who can bring in a top 25 team.
Well, he said on this program, he was a next up guest, and we usually say that good things happen to guests of the show, but in this case, he said that he would have a winning basketball team in 3 or 5 years, and that hasn't happened yet.
He saw the university through a very difficult time during the pandemic, and I think he did a good job. That is, as we are learning now, several years after the fact, the young people have been very hard hit by the pandemic, and that's an ongoing situation. So I wish him nothing but the best. Might have not have been as colorful or copy generating as Father Biondi, but I think he did a great job.
And sometimes it seems like that becomes cyclical, that after you have these larger than life figures, at times someone steps in and sort of, as Warren Harding said, an era of normalcy. I also think too that when he took over was right at the time when there was a lot of unrest on campuses because of police issues, black community, and I thought he did a good job of keeping things together on the campus there without shutting either side down, and then, as Wendy said, on keeping the campus open and operating during COVID. I think he deserves credit for quietly navigating through some really
That's kind of what I was going to say in this day and age where, name a university around here and it's something going on. And sure, they had their issues. I wish he and other administrators would be more vocal about the slave descendant issue that they have, but who helped, construct St. Louis University. But it's one of those things where, I don't know what you could say, but I wish you would say more. So that's, at one point, it's kind of unfair, but at the same time, I wish he's a little bit more vocal than that. But for the most part, I think it was solid leadership. I'm not going to fault him for the basketball team. I mean, in this day and age, there's a lot of things.
I'm sort of kidding. I mean, when you look at Fontbonnes, I know it hurts Wendy, and Webster University, these private schools are in trouble, and Dr. Pestello guided through those treacherous waters.
Not only did he guide it, but under his leadership, the school went from 13,000 enrollment to 15,000. That was huge. Yep. And then he increased the endowment by 88%. Stock market probably helped that a little bit too. But, as a guy who was the first non-priest to hold that position, I didn't know how he was going to raise money without a Roman collar, but he did it.
I remember saying at the time when we discussed that, I said, like, no, I think that's good. I think that's good that he's a non-priest. And just like I said, like, change can, like I say, at universities, you know, a new president, a new chancellor who's retiring and there's no scandal involved, or they didn't find out he was making $77 million, you know, or whatever. You know, it's so I got to applaud
I got
that.
a question for you.
Right.
He made $850,000 a year. How much does Travis Ford make?
I would imagine
$2.5 million.
I was going to say,
Oh!
I think
Now that's the lead we just buried.
Look at Gary. Look at Eli Drinkowitz and Dr. Choi. I mean, same thing, I'm sure.
Joe Holleman. By the way, thank you very much for gracing us with your presence.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
It was reported by your paper and elsewhere that there's a plan by St. Louis Mayor Tashara Jones to start a homeless village on Hall Street in North St. Louis, where the last tenants were jailed prisoners with the medium security jail. Right. So up in this area that's largely like a trucking industrial area, the plan is to have these tiny houses dot the landscape and provide refuge for people who don't have a roof over their heads. What do you think?
It sounds like a roof over their heads. I mean, I don't, I'm kind of, if there's any surprise in this, is that it's been kind of dithered about so long. Here is a vacant structure which provides protection from the elements while the city is trying to figure out how we can protect people from the elements. I even think before you start developing houses there, to see if it can be used as an emergency shelter now. What else are you using it for? I mean, if we want to buy into that homelessness is a crisis, it's at a crisis position, then why wouldn't a large empty building provide at least some relief to that situation? So I think it's a great idea not only to utilize that land, but if you can utilize the building that exists there to get people off the streets, out of the elements, put a roof over their head to where you can administer then things to them. It's easier to get them food. It's easier to get them medical care than if they're just sort of moving from place to place around in pup tents. I think it's a good idea overall.
I agree with you, except for I wouldn't just send people there like tomorrow, because you literally, this is where this kind of cities fall off. Okay, not only we're going to do this, we're going to get them there tomorrow. Then you find out that the roof is caved in on somebody's head and all that kind of stuff, and the plumbing doesn't work. Just make sure it is satisfactory and good to go. And if that takes 3 to 6 months, let's be patient. But let's not do it because we're going to have to make a little investment in it. It's going to take some time.
And obviously from safety, it would have to be checked out for safety, obviously.
Deirdre Wortham said in the paper that she was really surprised because, you know, she's happy that to hear the mayor's commitment that the jail will not be used for prisoners, but she still thinks that these homeless people will be out of sight, out of mind, and that they, you know, eventually they will have problems there as well. And they don't like, I don't know.
In all honesty, when I'm at my home, I'm out of sight and out of mind.
Not the same thing.
I mean,
environmental issues trouble me. The environmental problems.
Well, right now it seems like the city's plan for homelessness is pretty much global warming.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's going to freeze anymore because it doesn't get that cold. And I think this makes some sense. I mean, I was always in favor of just fixing up the workhouse and having more prisoners out there. But as long as that seems to be not on anybody's menu, I think that this works, and you have to have some transportation so that people aren't just stuck out there, because it's really unrealistic to walk many places from there.
Well, I don't know what the transportation would be, because a disability rights group recently looked at Call a Ride, which is run by Metrolink or by state, and they found that the average wait is 3 days to get a ride, and when you call, it takes you an hour to reach an operator. So they actually gave Bi-State a complete F on its ability to deliver people. Of course, now Bi-State's going to try and operate a light rail from north to south. I think since there are so many federal prisoners in our area who are now in Kentucky and Tennessee because there's no room in the local jails to house them anymore. And they can't see their lawyers because their lawyers have to travel a day or two to see them, that the federal government should take over that medium security workhouse, which has no documented problems, and put all those federal detainees there.
That's a great idea. The city would make money.
Idea.
Well, I hear that, but until the feds say they're going to do that, and it seems to me that they're not going to do that, let's address the problem we have. Right?
Okay, so where did the concerns about environmental issues come from in this age of Janus Elementary?
Well, I mean,
And
you know,
Westlake.
like you run a Geiger counter through there, and if it's not really up high, you just,
I mean, right now the emergency is they got to have housing.
Right.
It's like you couldn't have a smoking cessation program in Gaza right now. People have bigger, more immediate concerns.
Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Well, and I think that, and I think that's kind of what you're hinting at doing, though. If you're looking for the perfect place to put homeless people, you will never find them, and they will continue to live in pup tents under highway overpasses. So now, if everybody's happy with that, but clearly everybody's not. So here seems at least a place where there's land, where there's a facility, where utilities have been brought in there, so you have a bit of a head start. So if it is the crisis that everybody seems to want to label it as, then you have to handle it as a crisis.
Okay.
And get in there and use that property.
Alvin, Reid, I want to ask you about more than a proposal, a couple years in the making to move a branch or an auxiliary museum from the Negro League's museum in Kansas City to the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood in North St. Louis. That's a neighborhood that's just a little bit north of where we are right now on Olive Street and Grand Center. It's bounded by Jefferson, I guess, and Van de Venner and Grand Martin Luther King. What do you think? Would that be a great place for this museum?
I think it might be like the second great place, but the first great place would be to be downtown near Busch Stadium. And to develop Jeff Vanderloo again would be a tremendous, tremendous thing. And Kansas City has transformed the 18th and Vine area, and that was underway actually before the Negro League Baseball Museum was situated there. It is not, and I know it's going to sound crazy, I don't fear safety. I don't fear the neighborhood. I fear that not enough people would go to justify it being there. I think it would be a really cool tourist attraction. So let's put it where tourists are.
I can't argue with one bit of that.
The Negro League Museum in Kansas City is probably my favorite museum that I've ever been to in the United States.
Everybody says that.
They do such a wonderful job. It's small. It's manageable to take in without feeling like you've been through a SAT prep class. I agree with Alvin in that if you want people to go to it, that's going to be baseball fans. So the logical place to put it is somewhere near the ballpark in downtown St. Louis. I just think that it's just much more convenient when you get that tourist crowd into town. And we all know that a lot of people come to St. Louis for the sole purpose to go to Cardinal games. And they stay downtown and they walk to a restaurant. They go here. I think that a branch of the Negro League Museum would be a slam dunk winner somewhere within a couple of blocks from the ballpark.
The mayor
and
was
the old
clear.
courthouse.
When the mayor ran for office, she wanted to make sure that North St. Louis got attention. And this is where she's putting, so she's being consistent with doing that. And by the way, it was announced this week that Walgreens is moving out of Jeff Vanderloo. While she's at it, I think that she should see if some of that Kroenke money can persuade Walgreens to stay in Jeff Vanderloo. Because the nearest drugstore is now 2 miles away from that neighborhood.
Well, I'm just afraid that you'd give some of the Rams money to Walgreens and they'd stay for a couple of years and then move again.
I have a problem with just giving a private corporation money
please
to
don't
stay
leave us.
somewhere. I mean, but I get your sentiment.
I believe the Negro League's museum will be subsidized.
There was talk of it, but how they were going to do it, who knows? And I don't know if it was just cutting them a check out of the Ram settlement or ARPA money or whatever. But I mean, you know what? Is the first change empty or right along there? There's a lot of stuff that's just sitting empty right now.
That's right.
Bill McClellan, I want to ask you to say a good word or two about the late Bill Bryan, your longtime colleague at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, who passed away and was beautifully remembered by Tim O'Neill in your paper today.
Right. Well, Bill Bryan was on the Globe Democrat when I got here. And he was a great police reporter. And when the Globe folded, the Post hired Bill, and he just stayed right downtown. He didn't even come into the office. I mean, he was just an independent and very private guy, and he knew all the cops, and everybody respected and liked Bill, and he was a great reporter and a fine fellow.
I loved your story in the green room while we were in pre-production about how the reporters at the Post were the ones, go ahead, who insisted.
When the Globe was getting ready to shut down, apparently there was a poll, and Bill remembers this, or said, hey, who would you hire from the Post-Dispatch or from the Globe to come to the Post? And some people in arts or features had these certain people, a whole bunch of street reporters who were tired of getting beat by Bill Bryan on the cop beat said, hire Bryan for God's sakes and make him the cop reporter. And so he did, and never even came into the office for an interview, just moved all of his files. Bill used to carry around manila folders about this high, and would carry him everywhere he went. He didn't trust anybody. And so he apparently just moved that big pile of folders from one desk to the other and stayed there for years.
Oh, the days of that old police press room. We had an old couch that was right out of a movie, you know, with the springs coming out of it. And
front page.
Laying on the couch and the squawk boxes going.
Yeah. I miss those too, but Bill was instrumental when I was the young night police reporter, and I'd have some problem. He'd go, what's the problem? And I go, well, I'm trying to get a hold of, you know, Lieutenant Bill McClellan. Hang on. Hey, Bill. Yeah. And then, you know, within a minute, you know, I would get this information, you know, I'm trying to figure. So, and his wife, Kim, and his family, my condolences.
Our condolences. Yeah. Kim Bell, another fine reporter as well.
Yeah, newspaper man. And what a gentleman. And like you say, our kids went to school together in Kirkwood. My oldest daughter graduated with one of his daughters, and just a fine man and great Kirkwood guy.
Yep. Bill, let me ask you about Jay Ashcroft, the Secretary of State in the state of Missouri, who would like to reduce the income tax in the state, which is currently at a peak of 4.95%, down to 0, joining, I think, about 8 or 9 other states in the union. I think the 2 other Republican gubernatorial candidates are also behind the move. What's your overall opinion of not paying any state income tax?
Well, we have too many services in Missouri.
That's right.
You know, and the idea that we should have any services, you know, we don't need anything. I think it's one of the goofiest ideas ever. And, you know, Bill Eigel, who's running for governor, state senator Eigel, who was on our show Next Up, and I asked him about it. Where are we going to get any money? And he said, waste and fraud. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's just waste and fraud. For years and years, politicians have said that, and it's difficult for Eigel and Ashcroft and Keogh to say it since this is a Republican state. I mean, they're suggesting that the rural counties are, you know, full of waste and fraud. You know, we have to pay taxes if we're going to get something.
River WKRP in Cincinnati, and their attorney was there one time. He said, I may not have gone to a Ivy League law school, but calling that person that name on the air is slanderous. Well, I did not study math, but if you take 4.9% of the state income tax away, that leaves a 4.9% hole in the budget, and we're already broke. Right. So, I mean, great idea.
Well, I guess the bright side is you can't be more than broke. You're just broke.
No, we're not broke. Don't we have like a $5 billion surplus?
Well, but what I'm saying is, everything coming out of there is we have to spend less money. We cut this, cut that.
All right. Here, okay, I will say it's a bold plan to reduce the income tax to 0. However, when you look at places like if you were living in Seattle, or if you were living in Austin, or Naples, Florida, or Nashville, Tennessee, you wouldn't pay any income tax to the state. And yet, you visit all those states, and the state services are better in every way. every way, from the airport to the highways to everything else you see.
Well, if you
you got to raise some other tax.
Yes, and
Charlie.
here's what I would do.
And that's what they don't talk about.
I would raise the tolls. I would have tolls on highways.
All right.
I would raise the cigarette tax.
All
I
right.
would raise the gasoline tax.
Yeah.
And I don't know what else I'd raise.
Yeah, well,
So, wait a minute,
You know what,
Charlie.
that takes, Charlie? That takes enlightenment. That takes, like, smart thinking and people putting their political agendas and hatreds and everything else off to the side. Well, when Missouri decides they want to be that state, then we will be like Seattle and...
What I heard you saying...
We have a long way to go before we can be counted among those cities, in my opinion.
Well, and what I heard you saying, Charlie, was basically is you'd actually have a plan other than a campaign slogan of do away the income tax.
But
I'd be willing to listen to that. But it sounds to me that this is something that, because apparently it worked so well in Kansas, you know, first of all, we're following Kansas's model. I'll leave that for a second. And we're going to do this, but there is no other plan. We're going to do away with this, and it sounds wonderful in a campaign. Cut taxes. Everybody wants to hear that. Cut taxes. But what the part they're not going to tell you is we're going to have to raise this, and we're going to have to raise that, and we're going to have to do this.
Senator Igo wants
waste
to cut
and fraud.
no more personal property tax either. I mean, like Joe says, it all sounds wonderful until you get a bill.
Something's going on.
A chicken in every pot.
Because here's the thing. In this state, the reaction always is, oh, look at Kansas, and you're channeling Ray Hartman. I guess that seat's doing something to you, Joe.
Holding down the far left.
But when you look at our sales tax at 10%, 11%, 12%, it's not like we have lower taxes everywhere.
Right.
You go to some of the states I'm talking about, they have no state income tax, and their income, the tax on your restaurant bill is about 6%.
Well,
So I don't know how they do it.
Like I said, they have a way of looking and getting things done where it's not based
bogged
upon,
down.
it's not bogged down, and they just get stuff and they sit down and say, like, okay, for this to happen, we got to give here, we got to take there. And they work it out. We can work it out.
And they're willing to take federal money. I mean, you know, our senators stand strong that we're not going to get those earmarks, and we're not going to take federal money.
Well, and you also point out cities that it's far more expensive to live there anyway. I mean, you can live in St. Louis with all of these onerous taxes on us.
Yeah,
you can live there cheaper than you can in Austin or Seattle
Nashville,
Nashville or a lot of these other cities. So I don't think you can necessarily make that correlation that because they have lower tax, is it cheaper to live in Austin? I think not. Every article I read, people are complaining about how expensive it is to live in Austin.
Housing.
Well, you need those. You need those.
You can live in this.
Unless you have a workhouse. Unless you have a workhouse that's just sitting around.
Got the tiny houses.
All right. Let's move on to our final topic of the evening. Wendy Wiese, Bill just kind of brought up some of those other states take federal dollars, and we've got people, two senators who won't take earmarks. There's also an earmark, or I guess it's a Department of Transportation grant, to build a pedestrian bicycle wheelchair footbridge over 6440 connecting the Foundry Entertainment Area, the Armory, the Grand Metro Station, and the aforementioned St. Louis University.
Right.
Now, doesn't this sound like something the nation with a $34 trillion debt should say, well, if that little footbridge is so important, you should pay for it locally, but at this time, Washington, D.C. can't afford it. What do you think?
I disagree with that. I disagree with that attitude completely. And I think that we should be grateful and take it and spend it before anybody comes back to us with this. This is a time in our city where a footbridge as part of the Brick Line will lure young people to the city, and therefore I think businesses will follow because they want to keep their employees happy.
I agree, and we have a problem with people getting run over, and this would eliminate some of that. I think it could be, God, I can't, it'll be pretty. You know, that word with an E. Yeah, it'll be pretty. It'll help that area. I don't have a problem with it. You know, like Bill said, you know, there is some waste and spend in the federal government, I do believe, where I think we could pay for this. And, you know, this is just such a good idea that needs to get done.
And by the way, we are also the federal government. We fund the federal government.
Yeah, but
with those
we
taxes.
owe a lot of money. The federal government is in arrears. And you got to start at some point. take a look at the budget and decide what's necessary. Now, I'm not against the footbridge. If it's great for bikers, that's wonderful, but that's clearly something that should be local. A footbridge for bikers?
Yes.
You have to go to Washington, D.C. for that money?
The federal government was underwriting the loop trolley, Charlie.
That's the problem, Wendy.
I see. I see the comparison. But a footbridge and the trolley that is an apples and oranges comparison, in my opinion.
I agree, and okay, and I'm still one that says, okay, bad idea, but that doesn't mean all ideas are bad. So this one seems to be a good idea that would help a lot of people, that would help a part of our city. And it isn't like, I don't think we're going there with our hat in our hand begging to do this. They're looking for something to invest in. So let's take
I'm completely biased. I ride a bike. I can't wait for it.
I do too. So
I ride a bike too, but I also write a check for taxes, and I'm thinking, wow.
Wow, see, I don't pay those.
Yeah, that's right. He doesn't.
I don't have taxes. I live in the city, Charlie.
Well, I would just like to say to all the kids and grandchildren out there, someday you'll be paying for that bridge, so I hope you enjoy that, because apparently we're not paying for it right now.
We're not going to have any Social Security.
Hey, I do want to say, though, April the 11th is Donny Bash, and it's a big fundraiser for the station, and Ray Hartman, who's on the show for 37-plus years, is going to be in attendance. Woo-hoo! So if you want to shake his hand and say, hello, Ray, yeah, there you go. 5:30 p.m. is when we start schmoozing at the Sheldon, right across the street from here. Get those tickets now at 9pbs.org/DonnyBash. I think it's probably Ray's last appearance at a Donny Bash. So nice chance for you to say hello, thank you, enjoyed watching you. Hey, if you would like to write us, you can easily do so by writing to 9PBS, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Don't forget those emails, Donnybrook at 9pbs.org, and on social media, use hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Listen to us, first, call the 9 line at 314-512-9094. And then listen to us on your favorite podcast source, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, and Google Play. Thanks so much to Joe Holleman for joining us on this program. He'll be with us on an every other week basis. Next week, we'll say hello to Sarah Fensky. Everybody, have a great week, and thank you for choosing us this evening.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.